The sinkhole that opened up on County Road 47 in rural Nebraska wasn't supposed to be there. According to geological surveys conducted just 6 months earlier, the bedrock beneath that stretch of farmland was stable, solid, completely safe. But on March 12th, during the worst rainstorm the county had seen in 15 years, the earth simply opened up, swallowing a 30-foot section of road and everything nearby in less than 5 seconds. Officer Dashiell Riverton and his K-9 partner, a Belgian Malinois named Compass, had been first on scene when the call came in about a missing vehicle. What they found was a crater 40 feet wide and at least 50 feet deep, its edges still crumbling, rainwater pouring in like a waterfall. The missing vehicle, a sedan belonging to local teacher Winter Ashford, was somewhere at the bottom, buried under tons of mud and debris. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the sound. Faint, desperate, almost lost under the roar of rain and collapsing earth. The sound of a dog barking from somewhere deep underground. Not Winter's dog. The teacher didn't own pets, which meant someone else was down there. Someone nobody had reported missing yet. Dashiell had been with the Nebraska State Patrol's K-9 unit for 8 years, but his career had been marked by controversy from the start. 3 years ago, during a high-profile search and rescue operation, he'd ignored direct orders from his commanding officer, Captain Thorne Millwater, and followed Compass into a condemned building that was actively burning. Dashiell had saved 2 children that day, but Millwater had never forgiven the insubordination. The captain had spent the last 3 years looking for reasons to terminate Dashiell's employment, blocking his promotions, assigning him to the worst shifts, making his life difficult enough that most officers would have quit. But Dashiell hadn't quit. Partly because he needed the job, he was raising his younger sister after their parents died, but mostly because of Compass. The dog had been days away from being euthanized when Dashiell rescued him from a failed breeding program. They'd rebuilt each other, learned to trust again together. Dashiell couldn't abandon the only partner who'd never betrayed him. When Compass started alerting at the sinkhole's edge, body rigid with purpose, refusing to leave despite the danger, Dashiell knew immediately what it meant. There were living people down there, and time was running out. The rain was still falling, the hole was still collapsing, and within hours it would be completely filled with water and mud. Anyone trapped below would drown. Captain Millwater arrived on scene 20 minutes later with explicit orders. Secure the perimeter, wait for specialized rescue teams, do not attempt entry. The hole was too unstable. The risk was too high. Any officer who disobeyed would be terminated immediately. Millwater made direct eye contact with Dashiell while delivering those orders, the threat unmistakable. But Compass was already moving, following a scent trail to a section of the crater where emergency responders hadn't searched yet. And when the dog looked back at Dashiell with those intelligent eyes, the message was clear. Someone was dying down there and they were running out of time. Dashiell had a choice to make. Follow orders and let people die, or follow his partner and lose everything he'd built. He chose Compass. He always chose Compass. Dashiell Riverton's boots slipped on mud that was more liquid than solid, his body tilting dangerously toward the edge of the sinkhole before Compass's teeth clamped onto his sleeve and yanked him backward. The rain was deafening, pounding against his helmet, making it impossible to hear anything beyond his own breathing and the continuous roar of water pouring into the crater. He pressed himself flat against the ground, crawling the last 5 feet to where Compass had stopped. The dog's nose pointed downward into darkness so complete it seemed to swallow light. "Show me," Dashiell whispered. Compass barked 3 times, the alert pattern for live human scent. Not just one person, multiple people. The dog's tail was rigid, his whole body vibrating with urgency that transcended training. Dashiell pulled out his flashlight and aimed it into the hole. The beam cut through rain and darkness, revealing nothing at first except mud and debris. Then it caught something, a flash of reflective material. A child's backpack, bright pink with cartoon characters, hanging from a tree root 20 feet down. His radio crackled. "Riverton, this is Captain Millwater." Confirm you've retreated to safe distance. Dashiell's hand hovered over the radio. The safe answer was yes. The truthful answer would end his career. Compass whined, pawing at the ground, body angled like he was ready to jump into the crater himself if Dashiell didn't act. Rivorton, respond. Millwater's voice was sharp now, suspicious. Dashiell made his choice. He unclipped the radio and set it on the ground, turning the volume down until Millwater's voice became a distant buzz. Then he secured his rope to the nearest solid anchor point, a telephone pole that was already listing dangerously, and started his descent. The walls of the sinkhole were slick, crumbling at every touch. Dashiell's boots found no purchase, his gloved hands sliding on the rope despite his grip. Behind him, Compass barked frantically. The sound panicked in a way Dashiell had never heard from his partner. The dog understood they were separating, that Dashiell was going somewhere Compass couldn't follow. Stay, Dashiell commanded, his voice firm despite the fear crawling up his throat. Stay, boy. I'll come back. 10 feet down, the rope jerked violently. Dashiell looked up and saw the telephone pole shifting, pulled by his weight and the saturated ground. It was going to fall. In seconds, maybe less. He had two options. Climb back up and abandon the search, or drop the rest of the way and pray the landing didn't kill him. The decision was made by the sound that cut through the rain, a child crying. Faint, terrified, coming from somewhere below. Dashiell let go of the rope. The fall was shorter than expected but harder than he'd braced for. He landed in water that came up to his knees, the impact driving pain through his left ankle. Above him, the telephone pole crashed down, taking his rope with it, sealing off his only exit route. Compass's barking became frantic, echoing down through the crater. Dashiell forced himself to focus. Panic was a luxury he couldn't afford. His flashlight had survived the fall, still clipped to his vest. He swept the beam in a slow circle, revealing a nightmarish landscape of twisted metal, shattered concrete, and mud. The sedan was there, crumpled like paper, its roof collapsed, driver's side completely buried. But the crying wasn't coming from the car. It was coming from deeper in the hole, from a section where the ground had collapsed into what looked like an underground chamber. Dashiell waded forward, every step sending waves of cold through his body. The water was rising. He could see it, feel it, watch it climb higher against the debris. They had maybe 30 minutes before this entire crater filled completely. He reached the chamber opening and shined his light inside. What he saw made his breath catch. 3 children huddled together on a concrete ledge that jutted from the chamber wall. 2 girls and a boy, all elementary school age, soaking wet and shaking from cold. Their school uniforms identified them as students from Lincoln Elementary, 3 miles from here. Behind them, pressed against the wall, was an elderly woman. Gray hair plastered to her skull, one arm hanging at an unnatural angle, blood seeping from a gash on her forehead. "Help us," the oldest girl whispered. Her voice was barely audible, hoarse from crying. "Please, Mrs. Garrett can't move. And the water keeps getting higher." Dashiell's training took over, pushing emotion aside. "I'm Officer Rivorton. I'm getting you out. How long have you been down here?" "Since this morning," the boy said. His teeth chattered so violently he could barely form words. "We were walking home from the bus stop. Mrs. Garrett saw the road breaking and tried to push us away, but we all fell. She kept us together, kept telling us someone would come." Mrs. Garrett, the elderly woman, opened her eyes slightly. "School bus driver," she managed. "Retired. Walk this route. Make sure kids get home safe." The woman had saved them, had held 3 terrified children together through hours of darkness and rising water, through pain that must have been unbearable, through fear that would have broken most people. She'd kept them alive through sheer will and the belief that someone would come. And now Dashiell was here with no rope, no backup, and no way out. He activated his emergency beacon. a small device clipped to his vest that would signal his location to any rescue teams. Then he moved into the chamber, wading through water that was now chest-high on the children. "We're going to move to higher ground," he said calmly. "There's a section of concrete about 15 feet up that's still stable. We climb, we wait for rescue, and we stay together." "Understood." The children nodded. Mrs. Garrett tried to speak but only managed a weak cough. Blood flecked her lips. Internal injuries, Dashiell realized. Probably broken ribs, possibly punctured lung. Moving her might kill her. Leaving her would definitely kill her. He made the calculation every first responder dreaded. Who do you save when you can't save everyone? Above them, Compass's barking changed pitch. Not panic now, communication. The dog was trying to tell him something. Dashiell looked up and saw movement at the crater's edge. Flashlights. Multiple people. Rescue had arrived faster than expected. Hope surged in his chest for approximately 3 seconds before reality crushed it. The crater wall groaned. A deep, primal sound that vibrated through the water. Then it moved. Tons of mud and rock shifting, sliding, beginning the final collapse that would bury everything below. Dashiell grabbed the nearest child, the smallest girl, and threw her toward the concrete ledge. "Climb! Now! All of you!" The children scrambled, their survival instincts overriding fear. But Mrs. Garrett couldn't climb, couldn't even stand. Dashiell hooked his arms under her shoulders and pulled, dragging her through rising water as the walls continued their slow-motion avalanche. His injured ankle screamed with every step. His muscles burned. The water was at his chest now, then his shoulders, then lapping at his chin. "Officer Rivorton," a voice from above, female, professional, cutting through chaos. "Emergency response team is deploying aerial extraction. Do you have visual on survivors?" Dashiell couldn't answer. His mouth was full of muddy water. His arms locked around Mrs. Garrett, who'd gone completely limp. He reached the ledge where the children had climbed to safety and shoved the unconscious woman upward with the last of his strength. The oldest girl grabbed Mrs. Garrett's good arm and pulled with surprising force. Then the water rose above Dashiell's head. He went under, the cold shocking his system, his lungs already screaming for air. His hands found the ledge by feel rather than sight. He pulled. His boots found purchase on submerged debris. He pulled again. His head broke surface and he gasped, dragging in air that tasted like mud and diesel. A rope dropped from above, nearly hitting him in the face. "Harness the children first," the female voice again. "We'll pull them up one at a time." Dashiell worked mechanically, securing harnesses around small bodies that were hypothermic and going into shock. The first child rose into the air, disappearing into rain and darkness. Then the second. Then the third. Each lift took precious minutes they didn't have. Mrs. Garrett was unconscious now, breathing but barely. Dashiell secured the harness around her with hands that had gone numb. She rose upward, her body limp as a doll. And then there was silence. No more rope descended. Dashiell waited, counting seconds that felt like hours. Water now at his shoulders again and still rising. Above him, voices argued, heated, urgent, but the words were lost under the rain. Then Compass appeared at the crater's edge. The dog was dragging something. Another rope, thicker than the first, tied to what looked like a rescue harness. How the dog had gotten it, Dashiell couldn't guess. But Compass dropped the harness over the edge and barked once. The message was clear: climb or die. Dashiell grabbed the harness, secured it around his chest, and gave 3 sharp tugs. Immediately he felt tension, someone pulling from above. His body lifted from the water, spinning slowly as he rose. The crater walls were still collapsing, mud flowing like lava, consuming everything. He cleared the edge with seconds to spare, hands grabbing him, pulling him onto solid ground that felt as precious as gold. He lay there gasping, rain pounding his face, and the first thing he saw was Compass. The dog pressed against his side, licking his face, whining with relief. The second thing he saw was Captain Millwater's face, twisted with rage. You disobeyed direct orders. You endangered yourself and my rescue team. You're done, Rivorton. Badge and weapon. Now. Dashiell sat up slowly, every muscle protesting. The 3 children were wrapped in thermal blankets, being loaded into ambulances. Mrs. Garrett was already inside one ambulance, paramedics working frantically. All 4 survivors. All alive because he'd ignored orders. No, Dashiell said quietly. Millwater's face went red. Excuse me? I said no. Dashiell stood, favoring his good ankle, Compass pressed against his leg. You can try to fire me, but those kids will testify that I saved their lives. Mrs. Garrett will testify. And every news station in 3 states is going to want to know why you tried to stop a rescue that succeeded. The female voice from earlier materialized into a woman in her 40s, emergency response gear identifying her as Commander Natalia Cross of the State Search and Rescue Unit. She stepped between Dashiell and Millwater, her expression neutral but her stance protective. Captain Millwater, I coordinated this rescue. Officer Rivorton's actions, while unorthodox, saved 4 lives. I'll be including that in my official report. Millwater's jaw worked like he was chewing glass. Around them, other officers and rescue personnel were watching, waiting to see how this played out. The captain could push this, file charges, demand termination, make it a formal disciplinary matter. But he'd lose. The optics alone would destroy him. Everyone present knew it. This isn't over, Millwater said finally. He turned and walked away, boots squelching in mud. Dashiell watched him go, then looked down at Compass. The dog's tail wagged once, slowly, like he understood they'd crossed a line they couldn't uncross. Commander Cross handed Dashiell a thermal blanket. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've seen in 20 years of rescue work. I haven't decided which. Both, probably, Dashiell admitted. He was shaking now, adrenaline fading, cold and exhaustion flooding in to replace it. Cross smiled slightly. Your dog is extraordinary. The way he brought that rope to the edge, we couldn't get proper anchor points, couldn't stabilize for aerial extraction. Your K-9 saw the problem and solved it faster than my entire team. She knelt beside Compass, running expert hands over his body, checking for injuries. Where'd you get him? Rescue, Dashiell said. He was scheduled to be put down after failing out of a breeding program. Too independent. Too willing to make his own decisions. Cross laughed quietly. Sounds like his handler. She stood and extended her hand. I'm putting you and Compass forward for commendation, whether Captain Millwater likes it or not. They shook. Dashiell's hand was still numb, grip weak, but the gesture felt important. Paramedics approached then, insisting he get checked for hypothermia and shock. He let them lead him to an ambulance, Compass staying close, refusing to leave his side even when emergency personnel tried to separate them. He stays with me, Dashiell said. Nobody argued. Inside the ambulance, wrapped in blankets and hooked to monitors, Dashiell finally allowed himself to process what had happened. For people alive who should have been dead. A career probably damaged beyond repair. A partner who'd proven once again that trust was a two-way street. He looked at Compass, who'd settled on the ambulance floor, eyes alert despite exhaustion. Good boy, Dashiell whispered. Compass's tail thumped twice against the floor. At the hospital, Dashiell was treated for hypothermia, a sprained ankle and various cuts and bruises. The children were in rooms down the hall, being monitored for shock and exposure. Mrs. Garrett was in surgery. Her injuries were severe, but doctors were optimistic. The school bus driver who'd saved 3 children she barely knew would survive to tell her story. The media descended within hours. News vans lined the hospital parking lot. Reporters wanted interviews, wanted to know about the hero cop and his wonder dog who defied orders to save lives. Dashiell refused all interviews. This wasn't about glory or vindication. This was about doing the job when the job needed doing, regardless of consequences. But one visitor got through. The oldest girl from the crater, her name was Temperance, he learned, appeared in his doorway with her parents. She was cleaned up now, wearing hospital clothes several sizes too big, her hair still damp but braided. She walked straight to Compass and knelt beside him, wrapping her arms around the dog's neck. "Thank you," she said into Compass's fur. "You saved us. Both of you saved us." Her parents stood in the doorway, emotions raw on their faces. Her mother was crying silently. Her father's hands were clenched into fists, not from anger but from the effort of holding himself together. "We were told you might lose your job," the father said. His voice was rough, barely controlled. "For saving our daughter. That's not right." "It's complicated," Dashiell said. "Department politics." "I don't care about politics." The father stepped forward. "I care that my child is alive. If there's anything we can do, anything at all." "Just let her grow up," Dashiell interrupted gently. "Let her have a life. That's all the thanks I need." The family stayed for 20 minutes, Temperance talking to Compass the entire time, telling him about her favorite things, her school, her dreams. The dog listened with the patience that made him exceptional at his job, the ability to be present, to give someone his complete attention, to communicate without words that they mattered. When they finally left, Temperance hugged Dashiell carefully, mindful of his injuries. "I'm going to be a search and rescue person when I grow up," she announced. "Like you, so I can help people the way you helped me." Her conviction was absolute, unshakable. Dashiell saw his own younger self in her eyes, that moment when a child decides who they want to become based on who saved them. He nodded seriously. "You'll be great at it." Night fell over the hospital. Dashiell was cleared to leave in the morning, but for now he was stuck in observation. Compass had been allowed to stay, technically against hospital policy, but nobody was brave enough to tell the hero dog he had to leave. They lay together in the narrow hospital bed. Inappropriate and perfect, dog and handler reunited after coming too close to permanent separation. Dashiell's phone buzzed. A text from Commander Cross. "Captain Millwater has filed formal complaint. Internal Affairs investigation begins Monday. But I've already submitted my report and the families are going public. You're going to be fine. Get some rest." He set the phone aside and closed his eyes. Fine was relative. His career would survive, but it would never be the same. Millwater would find new ways to make his life difficult. Politics would complicate everything. But for people were breathing who wouldn't have been without his choice. That had to count for something. Compass shifted, pressing closer, warm and solid and real. The dog sighed, a deep, contented sound. Outside, rain continued to fall, but inside this small room, two partners who'd chosen each other rested together. Knowing tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight they'd earned their peace. 3 weeks later, Officer Dashiell Rivorton stood in dress uniform in the state capitol building, Compass sitting perfectly at attention beside him. The governor was speaking, talking about heroism and service and the thin line between following orders and following conscience. Dashiell barely heard the words. He was watching the audience. Temperance and her family in the front row, the other two children and their parents beside them, Mrs. Garrett in a wheelchair but alive and smiling. Commander Cross had been right. The families had gone public, and public opinion was a force even Captain Millwater couldn't fight. The Internal Affairs investigation had concluded that while Dashiell's actions were technically violations of protocol, they were justified given the outcome. His record would carry a formal reprimand, but he'd keep his job, keep his partner, keep doing the work that mattered. The governor pinned a medal to Dashiell's uniform, the State Medal of Valor, rarely awarded, never given lightly. Then she knelt and placed a second medal on Compass's vest. The dog's tail wagged once, polite acknowledgement, then returned to perfect stillness. The audience erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. Somewhere in the back of the room, Dashiell caught a glimpse of Captain Millwater's face, twisted with barely contained fury. The captain had lost this battle, but the war was far from over. Dashiell didn't care. He had his partner, his purpose, and the knowledge that when the moment came, when the choice was between comfortable compliance and difficult courage, he'd chosen correctly. That was worth any price Millwater wanted to extract. After the ceremony, during the reception, Mrs. Garrett wheeled herself over to where Dashiell stood with Compass. The elderly woman's injuries had been severe: broken ribs, punctured lung, shattered arm. But her spirit was intact. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. "When we were down in that hole, when the water was rising and I knew we might not make it, I kept telling those children that someone would come. That someone was watching over us." Tears filled her eyes. "I didn't really believe it. I was just trying to keep them calm. But I was wrong. Someone was watching. And he had 4 legs and the best partner a dog could ask for." Dashiell knelt so they were eye level. "You're the real hero, Mrs. Garrett. You kept them alive until we could reach you. That's everything." "We both know that's not how heroism works," she said gently. "You can't choose to be heroic. You can only choose to show up when someone needs you. You and Compass showed up. That's the only thing that matters." They talked for a while longer, sharing stories, building the connection that forms between people who've survived something terrible together. Eventually the reception ended, and Dashiell drove home with Compass in the passenger seat, the medal ceremony feeling like it had happened to someone else. His house was small, simple, adequate. Compass had his bed in the corner, his water bowl by the door, his toys scattered across the floor. It was a life without glamour, without recognition, without the things most people wanted. But when Dashiell lay down that night, Compass jumping onto the bed despite being too large for it, curling against his side with familiar warmth, he understood something fundamental. Home wasn't a place. It was a partner who'd follow you into hell, who'd drag rescue equipment to crater edges, who'd refuse to give up even when giving up made sense. Home was choosing each other, day after day, through discipline and danger and the quiet moments between. Compass sighed and closed his eyes, trusting completely that Dashiell would keep them safe through the night. That trust, unearned and absolute, was the greatest gift Dashiell had ever received. He'd spend the rest of his career trying to deserve it. Outside, wind moved through trees that were finally showing signs of spring. The long winter was ending. New seasons were coming. And somewhere in Nebraska, people were sleeping safely in their beds, alive because one cop and one dog had refused to walk away when walking away would have been easier. That was enough. It would always be enough.